Today I'm going to be showing you how I make sugar donuts. These donuts are super delicious. They are very soft and very fluffy, as you can see. This is not a dense and bready donut. Now let's start with the ingredients. You're going to need 1 cup of flour, also 1 cup of milk, 7 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 whole eggs, 1/4 cup of sugar and more for topping, 2 1/4 a teaspoon of yeast, half a teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now the first thing that I now like to do in my recipes that have eggs is crack the eggs in a separate bowl. Now I never used to do this. I would just dump the eggs in the mix, but after having a bad egg mess up a recipe, this is how I do it now. First, we want to add the flour to our bowl. Like I said before, I'm using 4 cups of flour, which is 560 grams. Then we add the salt, and that's going to be 3 grams. Then we're going to add 7 grams of yeast, which equals 1 packet. Then goes 58 grams of sugar, and also the 4 grams of baking powder. Then what I like to do is I like to first mix my dry ingredients before putting in my wet ingredients. Now the yeast that I used for this recipe was instant yeast, so no need for proofing. Now we're gonna add all of our wet ingredients. We start by adding the eggs, the milk, the vanilla, and the butter. Now all of these ingredients should be at room temperature. Here, I'm just making my dough in a bowl, but if you have a stand mixer, you could use it. Now, using a stand mixer could be a little faster, but then again, not everybody has a stand mixer. That's why I like to do my recipes by hand. After you add all your ingredients to the bowl, you want to slowly start mixing. The way I like to mix everything is I like to start in the middle and slowly keep mixing everything, and I keep bringing in to the center all that dry flour. And I like to scrape my bowl while I mix so nothing stays on the walls of the bowl. And this is how your dough should start looking. Then this dough, we're gonna take it to a flat surface because we're gonna need this for 15 minutes. Now you're gonna need for 15 minutes because you're doing it by hand. But if you use an stand mixer, it's gonna be half of the time. You know when it's ready because your dough will separate from the walls and you will have a smooth dough ball. Now after a little while of kneading the dough, I added about 2 tablespoons of flour. But still keep in mind that this is a very sticky dough, so it will still have a little bit of that stickiness even after you add those 2 tablespoons of flour. It's good to have a dough scraper around because this is going to help you to lift up that dough that is stuck to your surface and also stuck to your hands. Once you finish kneading, just make a ball with the dough. Then we're going to need a big bowl, and we're going to add about half a teaspoon of oil, and we're going to spread it all over it, and we're going to put our dough ball in there. Then you're going to cover the bowl with plastic wrap, and we're gonna let this rise for about an hour in a warm place. But remember, the time can vary depending on how cold or warm your kitchen is. Then you want to flour your surface, and you want to add a little bit of flour on top of the dough as well. Then we're gonna remove the air out of the dough by pressing down on it, and meanwhile trying to make like a rectangular shape. Then you want to add some flour to your rolling pin so we could prevent this from sticking to the dough. Then you want to stretch out your dough until it's about 1/4 inch thick. Then after we get our dough to the desired thickness, we're gonna take our donut cutter and we're gonna pass it through some flour. What this is gonna do is that it makes it not stick to the dough, and it's gonna be easy release. Then we can start cutting our donuts. So what we do is we take the mold, we put it on top of the dough, and with both hands you want to make pressure downwards and then kind of jiggle the mold so you can make sure that it separates correctly. Now we're gonna cut out all of our donuts. And each time I'm gonna cut a donut, I go ahead again and add some flour to the cutter. Now, how many donuts you cut at once, this will all depend on how you stretch your dough. For me, I was able to cut 7. But don't worry, because you're gonna take all of the scraps and then you're gonna roll it into a ball again, and you're gonna use it until you finish the dough. Now, what I always do and suggest you doing is that after you remove all the dough scraps, you make a ball and you let this dough rest. Because if not, once you try to roll it out as soon as you just cut it, it's gonna shrink again. So it's not that you cannot use it, it's more that it will be harder to use it. So just let it rest for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we're gonna put the donuts in parchment paper. What I like to do is I like to cut the parchment paper into squares, so this can help me handle better the donut. Some donut holes will fall in the process, just put them to the side so we can later on put them on parchment as well. Now you want to remove all of your donut holes that you got left, and then we're gonna transfer all the donuts to our baking tray. And don't forget to put some parchment paper down on a tray so you could put your donut holes on the tray as well. Now the donuts, you're gonna need to proof them for 45 minutes. What I like to do is I like to turn on the light in my oven, and with the oven off, you put in the donuts to rise. But before putting the donuts to rise, make sure they are covered well with some plastic wrap so the dough doesn't dry out. And this is how your donuts are gonna look after they rise for 45 minutes. Remember, this could take a little bit more time depending on how warm or cold your kitchen is. You could also slow rise these donuts in your fridge overnight if you want to. Then you want to take a bowl and add 1 cup of sugar. Then here what you see me doing is breaking up any little lumps that my sugar had. Now a little tip that I got for you and is that if you want to make churro flavored donuts, all you got to do is add 2 tablespoons of cinnamon to this sugar. Then we need to prepare a pan to fry our donuts. We're going to set our heat to medium high or about to 350 degrees. And then in my case, I added about 4 cups of oil. It doesn't matter how much oil you use, just make sure that is enough for the donuts to float and not touch the bottom of the pan while they cook. Once your oil gets hot, then you can add the donut. You want to cook these donuts for about 1 minute per side. You want to make sure that your oil is not too hot because they'll darken fast and they will stay raw in the middle. But if your oil is too cold, then the donut will absorb a lot of oil. You want to fry about 3 to 4 donuts at a time. But of course, this will depend on the pan size that you use. But just make sure that the donuts have some wiggle room so they can move around. Now to move the donuts around and remove them from the oil, I always like to use chopsticks. They are super helpful. Now once you remove the donuts from the oil, you want to put them in a wire rack so they could drain any excess oil. Then finish frying your donuts and then let them cool for at least a minute before you handle them. And once you fry these donuts, your kitchen is gonna smell so good. Trust me. Now, a good thing about this recipe is that you can use it to make stuffed donuts. You're gonna use the same ingredients, the same process. It's just you need a different cutter. The one, obviously, that doesn't have the hole in the middle. Once our donuts are cool, it is time to put some sugar on them. Now, luckily for me, I had a little bit of help right here in doing this part. Now, the hotter the donut is, the easier it will be for the sugar to stick to it. And if you want to avoid eating all that sugar, you could leave the sugar out and the donut is still very delicious. Just look at the inside of that donut, all those layers. It makes the donut very light, very fluffy. It is not dense at all. It breaks apart very easily. Just look at it. This donuts could last you about 3 days, but really fresh, really soft, and good 2 days. Now, after you fry the big donuts and you cover them and you taste them, important, don't forget about your donut holes. These are really good too. Now, to fry them, it's going to be the same temperature. The only thing is that the donut holes are a little more tricky to fry. You need to move them around constantly so they could brown evenly. Then all you got to do is coat them in sugar and enjoy. Now, thanks for watching and see you on the next video.